Okay, on to our final topic of the day. PSVR2 reviews are out, the embargoes have lifted, and the reviews of the tech itself are, for the most part, very positive. People praise its comfort and the level of immersion behind it and saying that they're big draws, so why people should use the PSVR2. Now, one review from the Washington Post praised its pixel resolution per eye. I think it's 2000 by 2040 per eye, saying that it offers a more pristine image than the $1,500 Meta Quest Pro, and that it's probably the most visually impressive VR device on the consumer market right now. Generally, the main issue that reviews have said, at least the ones that I've seen, are that it's still tethered to a PS5. So the tech is very good, especially considering that it's $550. But you have to factor in the price that you need a PS5 to hook this up to. You need to buy a $500, $400, $500 PS5 to hook this up to if you can get a PS5, and that you can't connect it to a PC, which means that the market for who can use this device is pretty small. But also, the game selection too. And at the moment, there aren't enough games for PSVR 2. Not enough worthwhile games, at least. Yes, Horizon Zero Dawn is great, but there aren't enough games like that. Most of the games are just previous PSVR ports or previous VR ports that are then being ported onto the system. So nothing that kind of utilizes the new controllers, the new haptics, that uses the new focal rendering. So it's, the technology is good, the hardware is good. And I think we talked about this in our last podcast too, right? Initially, people could only talk about the hardware. And yes, the hardware is great fit, controllers are great, everything great about the hardware. But when it comes to the software, when it comes to the games and the user experience, it's still not fully fleshed out yet. So I guess my question to you, from the reviews you've seen, have you gotten the same impression about the PSVR 2? Or I guess, have you heard more negative, more positive? What have you heard about the device?
Yeah, so the response has been incredibly positive from what I've seen. I believe IGN gave it a 9 out of 10. Digital Foundry gave it a very kind of in-depth technical breakdown, comparing it to some of the competition out there. And like you mentioned, the hardware, specifically of the headset, is very, not just competitive, but class leading. And I think we even mentioned this back when PSVR was originally announced, before we had prices or anything like that. One of the reasons why I speculated it was going to be a more expensive device is that the hardware surrounding the PSVR 2 was much better than all of the competition out, specifically of the headset. And I want to make that a clear distinction, because one of the reasons why I do think the comparison between the Meta Quest Pro, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here because I say this a lot, is a little bit weird, is like you mentioned, yes, you also do need a PS5 to use the headset, but that's still way cheaper than a Meta Quest Pro. The difference for me with the Meta Quest Pro is the controllers, and the fact that the controllers can track themselves. And that's a huge thing, specifically because in the original PSVR, if the controllers lost or were not in the view of the camera, the PlayStation Eye, your hands would just stop getting tracked and they would just go all over the place. Obviously, inside-out tracking helped that with the cameras on the headset. But the problem with that is if the headset cameras lose track of those controllers then lose tracking. With the Meta Quest Pro, what makes it kind of really, I guess, special, as someone who's never used it, but just technologically, in my opinion, what makes it really special is that not only is it wireless, so the headset is completely integrated and independent. You don't need anything else to attach it to, but the controllers are also completely independent, which kind of, to me, is the idea of what VR wants to be. This completely independent thing that doesn't require anything else other than the devices that are in your hand. And they can work independently of each other to the point where if you want to reach behind your back, you don't have to worry about your headset not being able to see the controller, because the controller can see where it is in relativity to the rest of the environment around it. That's not something that the PlayStation VR can do, but I think that's fine because it's still really, really good hardware. And from what the reviews sound like, the inside-out tracking is also really, really well done. So yeah, I definitely think that this is a really impressive hardware launch from PlayStation. and I think they knocked it out of the park in terms of the physical device. But yeah, I definitely the games are where it's going to start to get hurt. What really surprised me about this launch was the less than stellar response of Horizon Call of the Mountain. Um, Leading up to the launch, when people got a chance to try it, a lot of the conversation was around this could potentially be the best VR game ever made.
Mhm.
And I think, where I kind of fell for a lot of that narrative, or a lot of that, where I kind of fell for that conversation was, I think from what they were talking about, it was in terms of visuals. And what is really cool is that is based off the hardware, right? These are OLED screens that are like 2K per eye, that no one else in the market is able to do. High refresh rate OLED screens, 2K per eye. This is really cool stuff. And then you have the foveated rendering that can track your eyes and, give you the best visual quality specifically where you're looking. So games are going to look fantastic when they are designed for this device. But that doesn't mean anything in terms of gameplay. And that could be a little bit of an Achilles heel for this device, much like it was for the Vita, like we talked about last week, is that this is going to be completely dependent on whether or not the games deliver for the hardware that it's designed for. And it's all going to be based on whether or not we can get dedicated hardware for this, or dedicated software for this hardware, or at least software that targets this hardware first and then is ported to something like the Meta Quest. But yeah, it's just it's cool hardware. It's just hard to see whether or not the games are going to come. And once again, Half-Life Alyx needs to show up somehow. It needs to show up. I think that's either that, or Sony needs to dedicate like something like Naughty Dog to make a full flagship game like that for it, to kind of prove to people that this is something that they're going to support going forward. Because I don't know, it's an expensive device, and if people don't buy it up right now, I don't know if Sony's going to be willing to say we're going to invest a lot of money in the games for this.
Yeah. One thing that I think would be amazing, mentioning Naughty Dog. Right now, Last of Us is on TV.
Mm-hmm.
The series is on TV. This would have had to be something that's been in the works for years. If when the series ends, whenever the finale is for this season, if they come up with a PSVR2 experience of The Last of Us,
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be amazing timing. I think that would do very well, assuming they pull it off well. But yeah, that would be something that'd be interesting. But yes, Half-Life Alyx, which is widely seen as the best VR experience, needs to come to PSVR2, which sort of seems like it's the best VR hardware right now.
Yeah.
I think pairing those two together would be great. Now, whether that's Half-Life Alyx comes to the PlayStation system, or if PlayStation makes the ability for you to use your headset with PCs.
Yes.
Because right now you can hook up your PlayStation VR with the single USB cable to a computer, and it will recognize that this is a PSVR2, headset. But when you go into your VR, when you go into your Steam and you're trying to play VR games, it won't allow you to select it. So it seems like there is some ability to hook up your PlayStation headset to your computer. And I'm sure that there are some people who could find some sort of jailbreak or some sort of workaround to get the headset to work with the computer. But if PlayStation allows people to do this, I think that greatly expands the catalog that you could play. And I think it gets a lot more people interested. Yes, it's a great selling point. Yes, it's great for PlayStation stock that if you want to play with a PSVR 2, you got to buy a PS5. So yes, it gets more people buying PS5s. But if you just think, okay, we want more people to adopt our headset, that's how you get people to adopt it more. But do you think it's more likely that Half-Life Alyx comes to PSVR 2, or that PSVR 2 is made able to work with computers? Which one do you think would happen first?
Oh man, that's a hard one. I would hope that it would be Half-Life Alyx coming to PSVR 2 would be the more likely one. But the thing is, though, the only reason I say that is because Sony generally likes to keep themselves separate from everybody else.
Mhm.
and they don't like their hardware generally to work on other systems. They changed that with the DualSense, allowing that to work on PC right from the get-go. If you remember, the original PlayStation 4 controller did not work with PCs from the beginning. It took a long time for them to actually open that up to allow it to work. They did that with the DualSense. That was very cool. They also got the DualSense to work with iOS devices, in terms of like cloud gaming and stuff like that. And that was kind of surprising as well that they were so quick on that. So who knows? Maybe this is a change in the whole ecosystem around Sony and PlayStation, and allowing it to be a little bit more open. So I would hope that Half-Life Alyx comes to the PSVR, but I do also think, and this is just complete speculation, but let's say, for example, worst case scenario, this device does not work out for Sony and they decide we're not going to support it anymore. This gives them the very cool option to say, but you can use it on your PC and it will work perfectly fine, and you can play all your VR games and it will probably be the best VR experience that you can buy. And I hope they would do something like that before, or regardless of whether or not this thing is successful, and before any bad news or anything like that. If this is just the most successful VR device out there, I don't think that they would necessarily do that. I think they'd want to lock people down to the PlayStation 5. But yeah, I do hope that they would be a little bit more open-minded in that case. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely great hardware, and I think a lot of PC VR users would pick this up if they had the opportunity to use it with their PCs.
Yeah, definitely think so.